Hi there. Well, I'm really pleased to be here at the Daniel Katz Gallery, where they've got this amazingly first ever exhibition comparing David Bomberg and Frank Auerbach. Bomberg taught Auerbach. Bomberg's one of the greatest British Jewish artists of the 20th century. Frank Auerbach is one of the greatest British Jewish artists of the 20th and 21st century. And in this show, which is only on until the 18th of October, you can see them both together. Now, the reason I wanted to make a little film about it is because it's a wonderful show, and B, I just thought it would be a great thing to preserve the exhibition beyond the time when it closes on film. Now, in the first room, we're really looking at David Bomberg, born 1890. Look at this tremendous self-portrait. He's 41 years old. It's 1931. He's lived through a lot. He's been conscripted. He's been in the First World War. He's shot himself in the foot to get out. So miserable was his situation. He was almost court-martialed and executed, but somehow he survived. And here he is looking at us with this tremendous expression of determination, conviction, and the whole picture is painted in this way that makes you feel Bomberg's own sense, which was very profound, of how fragile and fleeting a human being is. He's almost been devoured by the paint that represents him. The liquidity of it is just something to behold. And over there in the far corner, we've got a wonderful example of Bomberg's work from the very start of his career as a young man, a young Jewish boy from the East End of London. There he is painting this image of the dancer in the language of vorticism, which shows that he's aware of what's going on in France and in Italy, futurism, cubism, Picasso, this sort of fractured language of form. And then if you come with me to this wall of pictures, we suddenly move, that picture there, the dancer, that's before the First World War has broken out, before he's been conscripted, before the agony, before the pain, before the shell shock. These extraordinary pictures that he paints in Jerusalem in the 1920s mark a complete, and this is characteristic of Bomberg, a complete reinvention of his style. Look at these astonishing becalmed images of this city, so much associated with, as we know, in many ways tragically associated with the coming together of different religions. But he's there in the 20s painting it, I think, to recover from the traumas that he's experienced. And he changes his style to something that is far more planimetric, ordered, rectilinear. It's almost as if these paintings are a form of meditation, a way of contemplating the world with greater ease of mind. There's a wonderful picture over there on the far wall of Petra that he painted during the same period. And it's got this astonishing, almost high sense of photographic realism. Bomberg could be an artist of so many different manners, so many different styles. But for me personally, his work suddenly takes off and reaches another level in the late 20s and the 1930s when he discovers Spain. And in Spain, Bomberg becomes this astonishing painter of landscapes and cityscapes. First of all, he goes to Toledo, then he goes to Cuenca, but eventually he goes to Ronda, where he will, towards the end of his life, actually settle and live there, but he develops this tremendously strong attachment to Ronda. And yet again, he changes his style, and he becomes fascinated by the consuming energies of the world, and he wants to create in art an equivalent to what he feels is the swelling, pulsing, ceaselessly vibrating nature of lived experience. And look at this picture of Ronda. I mean, there's nothing like it in previous art. The only thing I can think that comes close, actually, are the cityscapes of Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, the great ill-fated German expressionists, but they're some 15 years earlier. But isn't that just fantastic? The colour, the energy of it. And here we've got a softer, gentler, again, ronder landscape, looking at that viaduct that would become, within a few short years of this, that viaduct would become stained by appalling historical crimes. Franco's right-wing thugs would throw Spanish rebels off that great gorge to their deaths. But this is before that. Afterwards, Bomberg will paint that with that sense of tragedy, that sense of history. But here, it's all exuberance. It's all about the beauty of the landscape. And that, I think what he's great at in pictures like this is capturing the way in which the sun almost heats up this Spanish landscape and then releases the glow of that heat. And you can almost feel the heat coming off that painting. I mean, that's really, those are, I think I've talked about my favourite Bomberg pictures in the first room. But in the second room, it was in the 50s and the 60s in London that Bomberg and Auerbach first came together. Bomberg became Auerbach's teacher, and the second room of the show takes up, I'd call it influence, but it's deeper than that. What it shows is the extent to which Auerbach almost internalized Bomberg's ideas about nature, about representation, about the self, and brought them deeply into his own work. Now, David Bomberg was born in 1890. Frank Auerbach was born in 1931. And in 1948, when Auerbach was just 17 years old, he went to study with Bomberg, to study painting at the Borough Polytechnic. And Bomberg was a deeply inspiring teacher. Auerbach, so young, 17 to 22, spent 5 years with him. And all these years later, in this room, you can feel the energy between the two artists just fizzing and pulsating. Here we've got Bomberg's amazing depiction of Toledo, inspired partly by more inspiration, more influence, inspired partly by El Greco. Bomberg was haunted by El Greco's famous spiritual vision of Toledo and had to go to the city, had to paint it for himself. And this language of form that he's invented, this amazingly flexible, floating version of expressionism, which seems almost as if paint's not made of paint anymore. It's as if paint has become the buildings, paint has become the sky, it's become the hills. The energy in that picture is just to be believed. And then opposite that painting, we've got this wonderful picture painted by Frank Auerbach. I won't say Bomberg's disciple, but Bomberg's pupil, very much by this time, 1966, very much his own man. You know, he's invented this extraordinarily, I find it personally actually quite harrowing way of painting London. He painted a whole series of building site paintings, part of the meaning of which I think is embedded in Auerbach's own life. He'd been removed from Germany, or he'd been sent out from Germany by his parents in 1939, preserved from the horrible attentions of Hitler's goons. The rest of his family, as far as we know, died, but Auerbach survived, came to London, and when he paints London rising, you know, as it did after the war, after all the destruction. And even in this picture, you've got this sense of London as a kind of, not a city so much, almost as an organism. All of the human energies making this city rise again from some kind of primordial slime. I think he is indirectly, for me, commenting on just how appalling the world had been and how this has to rise up from it. You know, there's this sense of, it's very powerful in Auerbach, in his portraits as well as his cityscapes, this sense of persistence, this sense of defiance, this sense of, well, you know, humanity had got to the lowest point, but we will rise again. The world will rise again. It's not quite the same. He's sometimes compared with Francis Bacon, Auerbach, but he's he doesn't scream against the chaos. He's more interested in rising up. And I think he gets that from Bomberg, because Bomberg had experienced the horrors of a different war. So they really have a lot in common. And when Bomberg, you can see that there's another room, one last room, which has got some drawings in it, mostly by Bomberg, but a little bit by Auerbach, 2 Auerbachs and 4 Bomberg drawings. And Bomberg, for me, is one of the 3 or 4 greatest draftsmen of all world art in the 20th century. I mean, his Blitz drawings of London are among the greatest drawings ever made by any artist at any time. And you can feel the energies. Again, in Bomberg, Bomberg is depicting the city of London during the Blitz and the city of London not being destroyed by German bombs. And although we haven't got a City of London drawing in there, you've got drawings that convey that sense of energy and exuberance. And I think that's something that these artists have got in common, a kind of profound, dogged, despite everything, despite war, optimism. And there's a wonderful other example of it here in an Auerbach landscape. I mean, all Auerbach's landscapes are very London-based. This is a Primrose Hill landscape. And again, I don't know if you can see it, if it comes through on the camera, I hope it does, but you can feel, I think, the way in which Auerbach's use of paint, Auerbach's language of paint, Auerbach's graphic language, because this is a drawing as well as a painting, it's drawing in pigment, has got that same certain something that you find in Bomberg, that energy, that sense of, Bomberg called it the spirit in the mass, which is a wonderful phrase. And I think, there's another artist who's from North London who had something of it also, which is Constable, who interestingly, both Auerbach and Bomberg evidently hugely admire. So there's a kind of romanticism at play here, as well as a kind of determination and a doggedness and a desire to express the joy of life in defiance of war and misery and unhappiness and all those things that come to bring us down. And finally, there's this small space, almost like a coda or a little full stop to the exhibition. And I couldn't leave it out because although it contains no paintings, these drawings give it such an intimate feel. You've got 4 Bombergs. His stepdaughter could almost be a Matisse or a Caryatid, very classical. And these are just amazing, pulsating drawings of Ronda done in the 50s, one of them in the 30s. That's the rooftops of Ronda. The city almost seemed like a crystal. Puts me in mind of El Greco's Toledo as much as Bomberg's painting of Toledo does. And this isn't Toledo, it's Ronda, but you feel as though this is a city trembling under the eye of God somehow. I think my favourite drawing, that's great, but I love this one. I think this one of the sunlight in the valley, that really is a kind of cosmic landscape. To me, that's almost like Jackson Pollock. It's got that explosive energy. It's a far bigger image than it appears. And so those are the Bomberg drawings, and it's as if Bomberg has passed this on in some way. But here are 2 innocuous, almost small drawings by Frank Auerbach of, I think, Primrose Hill, one of the parks of North London. But again, look at the energy, the vigour, the fierceness of the strokes, the mark making. It's not Bomberg's handwriting. I mean, in a way, Auerbach's painting in the other room looks more like the painting by Bomberg. The drawings look more different, but you can feel the intention is very similar. The conviction is very similar. The determination to seize a moment of lived experience and capture its energy and pass it on to the world. It's there in the Auerbach, just as it is in the Bomberg. It's as if Bomberg's taught him a language and he's finding something else to say with it, something more to say with it. And it's just very, very beautiful. It's a wonderful, it's a wonderful show. And I think, I'm sure Bomberg would be honoured to be exhibited with Auerbach and would have been absolutely thrilled to see what Auerbach became and the artist he turned into. And I know that Auerbach He said it, actually, that he is honoured to have been shown with Bomberg on this occasion. So, it's a marriage made in heaven. Fantastic, fantastic. Just a great thing to have done. And, do catch the exhibition if you can. And if you can't, if it's too late, if you're watching this after the show's closed, then perhaps this can stand as a memento of a really, really wonderful exhibition.